Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's Southern California program titled The Dark Archives of Sunny California. Had a different title maybe when you registered for it, but this one's brand spanking new. The Dark Archives of Sunny California. Thank you for joining us here at Pasadena Heritage and the beautiful Blinn House. We love having our events here, and we love welcoming you to this wonderful gem of a building. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all and host this program this evening. For those of you that might be new to the Book Club of California, there might be a couple of you out there. The Book Club of California is a nonprofit, member and donor-supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes we do that with a focus on the history and the literature of California and the West. Now, the book club publishes limited edition, finely made books. We have a scholarly journal and club newsletter, and we have keepsakes for our members. We host a year-round series of programs and exhibitions like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, California history, and so much more. Now, if you're not a member of the book club, you should be. If your membership has lapsed, you should renew it. And you should join or rejoin our century-long tradition. Our membership dues are modest, the benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work of the book club without the support of our members. So I encourage you to join us, visit us online to find out more at bccbooks.org. And now, tonight's program, The Dark Archives of Sunny California. Megan Rosenbloom is our speaker this evening. She is a Collection Strategies Librarian at UCLA Library here in Los Angeles. She previously worked, I love this, as a medical librarian at University of Southern California Norris Medical Library and as an obituary editor for the Journal of the Medical Library Association. That's crazy. That's a crazy job. These roles may be part of the origins of her super keen interest in the history of medicine and rare books, leading her to become an expert in this very specialized area called anthropodermic bibliopegy. Try saying that. That is the practice of binding books in human skin. She is also a team member of the Anthropodermic Book Project, a group that scientifically tests skin-bound books to determine whether their origins are human. There are jobs like that out there for you. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from Drexel University and her Master of Library and Information Science from the University of Pittsburgh. Is that you? You got a fan out there. She was founding president of the Southern California Society for the History of Medicine, and she continues to serve on that board. The subject of her talk tonight is also the subject of her best-selling debut book about her incredibly interesting work. That book is titled Dark Archives, a Librarian's Investigation into the Science and History of Books Bound in Human Skin. Now, if you have questions for our speaker, which I'm sure you will have questions for our speaker, please wait till the end of the presentation. We will have time for some Q&A at the end. Now I just ask you to join me in welcoming Megan Rosenbloom to the microphone.
All right, how's my volume back there? Good? Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks to the Book Club of California. Kevin nailed the pronunciation of anthropodermic bibliopegy. I used to mispronounce it myself for an embarrassingly long time, so I was impressed that he got that on the first go. So today, I know that the RSVP where it just was kind of generic about my book, and we will get into all the stuff that, a lot of the general stuff about books bound in human skin, what the history is, the scientific process of testing them, but then I decided to kind of tailor it to California bibliophiles. So we are going to, after we get through the sort of background stuff so that you know what I'm talking about, I'm also going to be showing some California books, California related books, whether human skin books or related in a different way. And at the end, depending on how much time we have, I might do a little show and tell for some art-bound books that are fun to talk about if we have time. So we'll see. So, like Kevin said, anthropodermic bibliopegy. This is anthro, human, dermic, skin, biblio, book, pegy is fastened. So to fasten books in human skin, that is the sort of 50-cent phrase for the practice. The photo here is of the Dance of Death. It's actually one of multiple Dance of Death, Hans Holbein's Dance of Death copies that have been bound in human skin. This is the image, this is the only image that appears in my book, because, you know, during the publishing process, a few people were like, can't we have more pictures? Can't we have more pictures? And I said, there would just be pictures of brown squares. Just plain brown squares, you know, and that would be it. Because unlike this book, which obviously has some skill applied, we've got cross knuckle bones in the corners, and the onyx, and the gold, and the skull, and the little arrows crossing all around the middle. I thought this one was appropriately spooky looking, might signal something is going on with this book. But the vast majority of human skin books just look like any other book, and you would have no idea. With the exception, actually, of one of the ones in private hands, which I'm gonna show later in the talk, which nobody ever really gets to see, so spoiler alert there. But so I picked this one for the book just to say, hey, this is some of what it looks like. But this one in particular, it's got this kind of weird grayish color. It says, the notes in the catalog say it's a human skin in imitation of deer. And it just goes to show that human skin books can look like any other book. They can be any color. The color has nothing to do with this color of someone's skin in life. And they can be in all different kinds of textures. I've had the probably I would describe as a misfortune of holding human suede books. I've seen those, you've seen shiny ones. You know, it's really just as varied as you can encounter in antiquarian books. So what is the deal with these books? I thought I'd give a really quick kind of grouping into categories. Of course, there are always exceptions, but in general, over the course of my studying these books, what I found is that they are primarily made by doctors in the late 18th and throughout the long 19th century. These are like Western doctors, so you find them in Western countries in general, America, the UK, France, Scotland, and then a few have made its way to the colonial properties of those places, like Australia. They are often, in the case of the UK books, which my team has not tested, so I can't say definitively these are, confirmed, but there is a strong cohort of alleged human skin books that have a lot of very specific provenance associated with them as a byproduct kind of the execution process, right? So there's this punitive element to the ones in the UK that doesn't really exist in the ones you find at other places. So the stories behind them, knowing who they are, they're often books of a trial transcript of a murderer and allegedly bound in their skin. There's a lot going for it that would make you think that it was probably genuine, but I haven't actually tested those. Otherwise, patients of doctors in the hospital, in the clinical medicine. Now at this time, clinical medicine, you would go to a hospital. If you were rich, you would have your own doctor, right? and it would be highly unlikely this would happen to you, right? But if you were not rich and they set up the beginning of clinical medicine, which in a lot of ways was a vast improvement over the previous era of just what you were taught and then learning nothing else and apprenticing with one person and maybe just working with a family. The clinical medicine system, also called the Paris School, is kind of created in order to make doctoring more scientific. And part of that is seeing a lot of patients at the hospital bedside. Part of it is exploring the dead body through cadavers and anatomical dissection. And it was often during the anatomical dissection process that doctors would save skins to use on their favorite books. And it's a mindset that is really hard for us to square today as individuals, but also in association with doctors. But there are a lot of kind of ideas of why I think those things went together, which I get into pretty in depth in the book. I can answer questions about it a little later, but on the whole, if you are able to find out anything about the background of a human skin book, there's usually a doctor involved, whether it was the owner, the person who had the skin, or, you know, a person who collected them, right? Like a doctor book collector. In terms of topic that a book might be, you often find medical texts found in human skin, but there could be literary texts, there could be philosophical. There's, you know, it runs the gamut. In general, I would say it would be, you know, a doctor book collector's oldest, rarest, favorite book that they might find in human skin and make it extra rare, extra special. That's generally what you see. But again, exceptions. What they're likely not, I always have to give the likely, because there's actually one list on here that there is an exception to. But, you know, affiliated in any way with Nazis. Now, this is generally the first question I get asked is, was that a Nazi thing? And the answer is no, but there's really good reasons why people have that association, but it was really happening way after the time period when this was taking place. And, you know, Nazis made things with human remains, but it was generally not books. And we don't have any definitive proof of actual books that were made with human remains. But it's such a strong image of the Nazi lampshade and things like that, that people like associate skin, making something out of skin, the worst thing or people can think of, and they put it all together. Sexual fetish objects. I get this question like a surprising amount about whether this is like a sex thing, and I used to say no, weird. But there is one actually that at the Grolier Club, they have a book of really old BDSM poetry that's found in human skin. So that's the exception. When I went to visit it before we tested it, I was like, this isn't probably, and then lo and behold, the exception to the rule, right? Occult objects. I'll talk a little bit more about occult objects later on, but people tend to think Necronomicon, you know. I will say this for the occult book collectors of the world, I do feel a kinship with them because they really love the physical book, right? And to this day, the people who collect occult books, they care so much about the package and the presentation and, you know, the physical object. You're not gonna catch occult book fans really reading on a Kindle or something. This is like, if you've got the means, you tend to really sort of fetishize that object of the book. So you would think you would see more occult books, but a lot of the ones that I've come across that we've tested turned out to be sheep. So I think some of that may have been market deception, where they're trying to make it, you know, a seller is trying to build a lore around an object that is an occult book. and in hopes that they could fetch a higher price. I can't think off the top of my head of an occult book that has been in a library or museum that has been confirmed as human. And what they're likely not, again, big likely is made today. It's partially because there aren't a lot of handmade books today in the whole. And the big question of legality is actually, I have a whole chapter about it, and the answer is it's complicated and depends on where you are. And even state by state in the United States. And, you know, certain countries, yes, certain countries, absolutely not. So this is the human skin book, and now we're starting to get into the pictures that, you know, are sort of exclusive here to my research photos. But most people heard about human skin books outside of library land with the case of the Harvard skin books. Now, this case just is a case that keeps on unspooling. Every couple of years it roars back up and something else happens. But the reason that it came to most people's attention was around 2014. Harvard undertook to apply a test that was being used at their Peabody Museum on other artifacts. You know, is it this animal, is it that animal, that kind of test. They wanted to see if it would work on their alleged human skin books. And they tested them, and they had 3 alleged books. One was in the medical library, as you might expect to find it. One was in the law library, and then one was in Houghton. And it was the one in Houghton that turned out to be real human skin. And the fact that there was actual definitive scientific proof of a human skin book, it really sort of, you know, exploded. And the PR around the situation was maybe not what they would have expected. There were some people thinking, wow, this is really cool, it's a cool way to use science, wow, this is so creepy, you know, what an interesting story. And there were other people who wanted the book destroyed. And that cohort of people who were on that trajectory, you know, at first that didn't work. But more recently, there was a renewal of that effort, I guess. And then Harvard had also suffered some bad public relations regarding human remains. I don't need to get into it, you can look it up. Coincidentally, around the same time, and it seems that they then made a different choice so that this book has since been basically destroyed. They removed the binding from the book. The advocates for the removal of the binding of the cover say that it's not technically destruction if they didn't unsew the book, but they took apart the physical book and it's not together anymore. The original book was was even further on restricted access than regular special collections to begin with, and now they've removed the cover, and now they're doing provenance research about it. And now they're looking into things like, do we repatriate it to France? Can we find out who this is? But they've already taken it apart. And so it's an interesting choice of order there, and I don't know what's gonna happen with that. But generally, repatriation happens because someone requests something. And so it's a really unusual case of an unusual book that has had an unusual tale over and over again. And we'll see what happens next, and we hear what ultimately results with this book. But this is sort of the one that launched a lot of people's awareness. So there's Daniel Kirby. He is the chemist who did perform the Harvard tests, and then we met while I was researching the topic in a generalized way, and we sort of decided to join forces, and then got some other folks on board, someone who now works at Yale, and the former director of the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. We all got together to see, hey, let's see if we can find out how many of these books actually exist. Can we take rumors and things we've heard about at different places and try to actually match it up with a specific individual book, and then see if the institution and libraries and museums would be willing to undergo a small test on the book, and then, you know, see which ones are real, which ones are fake. Because with that Harvard test, there were 3 alleged books, but only one of them was real. So how many of these actually exist? We know at least one in the world does. And how many just have this association with it, and it's not scientific reality. So that was the sort of birth of the idea of the Anthropodermic Book Project. Now, the test, if there are more questions about the nitty-gritty of the test, I'm happy to go into more detail, but I want to be mindful of time. This is Daniel's sort of idea, the visual sort of reference for how small a sample size could be. But now, with the recent demise of the penny, I wonder how long this is going to be a reference point for people. If anyone has if anyone has an alternate sort of visual representation, please do let me know later. But in general, let's just say if it's big enough for a human eye to see in that little tube, then it is plenty big to conduct the test. So the test is technically destructive, but would you notice that small of a piece being taken off of a binding? Probably not. But some places have extremely strict rules about any kind of destructive test of any kind, and so, you know, Bibliothèque Nationale de France probably will never test their 3 alleged human skin books, for instance. So that little bit of that book gets digested in an enzyme called trypsin. It goes through a mass spectrometer, and what you get out is this lovely little graph here, and the graph corresponds with a library of protein marker, you know, there's like 7 protein markers, and you can see the different shapes of the markers, and you can very easily distinguish by just looking at the shapes what kind of animal comes from. Now, the specificity of that animal, again, I could get into this later, it depends on their evolution. So for humans, the closest we can get is great ape family. Most leather animals are from Bovidae, and they differentiate far enough back in evolutionary time that they have one marker that's different, and that's how we can tell it's sheep, it's deer, it's goat, it's cow, which is very convenient for me. Just so happens to work out that way that we can hit most of them. I use the sheep one as a comparison because that is the most often imposter for human skin, even though pig technically looks more like human skin. I heard a bookseller once say, well, if it's sheep, it's probably sheep. And so I think the sheepskin tends to get stains and look a little weird, and it just has a creepy look, and people think that is human. Maybe lore gets attached to it from there. So the most recent figures for the project, we've identified 51, and this is in public libraries and museums, public institutions. We've had more tests in the private market. We've also tested things that aren't books, but I can get into that later too if anyone's curious, but 4 books in public. We've identified 51. We've tested 32, which I think is pretty good considering having to get permission from all these institutions. And 18 had been confirmed as human and 14 not. And so that number just actually ticked up a little bit. It was at 50 for like years, and then we tested one recently and it was not human. So there's me doing my one and only retrieval at the Huntington. So here we go to California, and Southern California at that. I'm not the most dexterous person in the world, but I was willing to use my little sharp tweezers to get the little sample off here at their beautiful conservation lab at the Huntington. And so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the objects that we tested at the Huntington, which is basically in the neighborhood here. So here is that book. It was written, it just has the initials MN, but historians have kind of speculated that this is Thomas Gibson, who was a physician general, the English Army. That it was originally published in 1682, but this is a 1737. It's sort of this compendium of anatomical learning that acquired, that sort of accreted over time, and it has really cool images in it. But it's, just a regular small size book. It's not one of those big ones. And it also has the local connection besides just being at the Huntington. It was actually donated to LACMA. Now this is not the LACMA you're thinking, the art museum. This is the other one, which is the LA County Medical Association. There used to be a whole building library that was for the LA County Medical Association, full of rare books. And they closed that building down in the mid-20th century, and then the sort of workaday books went to UCLA, and the super special rare ones went to the Huntington. And there was this group that stewarded the library called Friends of LACMA, and then that became the George Stock Society for the History of Medicine, and then that became the Southern California Society for the History of Medicine, which I was founding president of because I was the first president with that name. And so it is still a basically doctor, bibliophile, and other people interested in the history of medicine bibliophile group. So this Dr. Blake Watson, he was a big collector. He used to be OB chair at St. John's in Santa Monica. This was his book. We tested it, and all of the markers that I told you before that sort of tip your hand one way or the other, it was real. So as for now, I believe in terms of public collections, this is the one local confirmed book. But it's not the only alleged, and there may be tests soon, we don't know. Been in talks with people, but nothing's shaken out, and they will remain confidential until they're not. But they had two objects that we were supposed to test. So this other thing is like I said, we did do some non-books. This is a skin object. It was like a note on a skin. You could see the spelling is pretty erratic, but it alleged some pretty horrible crimes associated that they were alleging against Native Americans during the American Revolution, and that this person wrote the note as a means of escape on a white man's skin. Well, guess what? It wasn't real. So then, it calls into question a whole lot of things. There's some more details in the book, but I was able to find some information about the person. There's a spelling mistake in the name, there's all sorts of things. But in general, it does, when you find out that something is saying it's human skin and then it's not, then you also kind of wonder a lot of other things about the story that it's telling. But, whoever acquired this at whatever point believed it to be real, right? And presumably believed a story maybe that was attached to that as well. So, to me, the fake ones are just as interesting, if not more, than the real ones, because you wonder, when did that story get associated with it? Was it an active deception? I often think it's not an active deception. I often think it's just someone doing, in the case of this, maybe not, but with a book, usually the only thing that's written inside the book is bound in human skin, and that's your one tell. And who wrote it, and when, and why, you might never know. But one thing about this one that I've come to see as a trend is that if the race of someone is mentioned, every book that we've tested so far that mentions a race has been fake. Coincidence? Maybe. But it has been consistent. So here's one I don't know if anyone knows about. This is a case of a French bookseller. So this is one of those private cases that we tested. There is California associations here, but came all the way from France. Bookseller asked me on behalf of their client, can we test their 3 alleged human skin books? So 2 of them were occult in nature. The one was, 15, the text block is from 1579. And there's also this like triple infernal vocabulary from 1840. So you can see that images are actually the testing images of where he took the samples so that we could, so that our chemists could see where he took the samples from. The middle one is Le Scarabée d'Or. Any French speakers in the house, that's Edgar Allan Poe's The Gold Bug. And so this book, turns out, despite a lot of things about it that made me think it wouldn't be real, is real human skin. So, and it's one of the more decorated books that I've seen. So I'm sorry that this image is not that clear, but it's the only binding I've seen that is also kind of a spoiler alert, because you've got like the skull and there's this thing hanging down with the bug hanging off of it, the little gold bug, and there's some size and things. It's pretty cool, but it doesn't stop there. This book was on private auction from PBA Galleries in San Francisco, so it was being sold by San Francisco Outfit, bought by a French collector, and has a lot of really interesting, fun things all associated with the book besides the human skin element. And at the time that it was purchased, it was just purchased with the idea that it might maybe be bound in human skin, but not with any sort of confirmation. So that came after, which is probably why he got away with only spending $850 on it, which is quite a steal. I know, right? I see some open mouths. Wait, it gets even more interesting.
2,000.
So here you go. Here's a little handwritten note that's inside the book. No, it's hard to read, but it says, "Dear John, what a tribute to the morbid, death-loving Poe to bind the gold bug in human skin, or is it an attempt at a pun? Poe humani en peu humain." So Poe humain is human skin. So the Poe, and the note to John is from CESW. As Charles Erskine Scott Wood, he's a sort of anarchic Oregon frontier aristocrat. HBO is waiting to make a movie about this guy, I have to tell you. He helped found the Portland Art Museum. He made Multnomah County Library free to the public. And apparently he was best friends with a John, and that John was John Steinbeck.
Oh.
So is this Dear John to John Steinbeck? The owner thinks so. I don't know any other corroborating evidence for it, but it's pretty interesting, and we all know that John Steinbeck is the pride of California writers. So did John Steinbeck own a human skin book? We don't know, but it's sure pretty interesting, right? Would love to find out somehow. I would love to get in touch with some Steinbeck scholars to see where this book came from originally. But I know who owned it at one point, because there's this book plate in there from Russell Van Arsdale Lee. Now, he was a doctor. Told you there's always some doctors somewhere in there, at least one. He's part of this really interesting story past of doctor book collectors over history, who either create these books or collected them. So Dr. Lee helped popularize group practice in American healthcare. So now we're gonna do family tree. Here's Dr. Russell Van Arsdale Lee, you own this book. His son, Peter Lee, was the professor of clinical medicine at USC. He used to have a history of medicine book club at my library when I was working there, up until his death at age 93. He helped establish Medicare. His son, also Peter Lee, worked with Obama to craft the Affordable Care Act and was the founding executive director of Cover California until 2022. So that is like 3 generations of extremely impactful American medical doctors, policymakers, Californians, all touch this book in a certain way, which I was just, as I pulled the thread, I just couldn't believe all the really cool context. It's almost like this journey through American healthcare history and California's like specific role in it. So obviously I love the provenance stuff, right? And this book has, this practice, what are some of the implications for the history of the book? I like to show our own alleged human skin book at UCLA as a good example, right? So there are, what do you see? Multiple stamps here, right? You have the evil stamp that bites the little holes in it, that's in there. There's like another ownership stamp, and there are at least 3 different handwriting. The Brillia Humaine, which is bound in human skin in a script. Then there's, from the library of Monsieur Billon, who was Armand Jerome Billon, who was Louis XV's librarian. It was owned by a professor at Berkeley. There's like all these things before it got to UCLA. And you can kind of see up in the corner, there's a clamshell box up there to protect this rare book, and also to handily let people know, hey, this is the human skin book, because it has a little short title, and then in parentheses it says human skin binding. And then before I started working there, my team tested it, and guess what? It is not human skin. So this object is kind of lying to us, like in so many ways. It's just screaming human skin book. There's so many people who were associated with it, who believed it was human, who made specific notes about where it came from and why they know it's human and it's not real, right? So it just, I think that this practice also highlights underdocumented parts of like the bookmaking process and stewardship, about the stewardship of like writing in books and keeping notes and making clamshells, and, doing all these things to like signify something about the book based off of what you believe to be true at the time, your best belief. But, some art binders sign their bindings, but a lot of them don't. But, who tanned the skin? We often know maybe a doctor collected it. Did he tan it himself? Did he have a guy? Who was that person? There's so many people who are associated with the creation of this book in one way or the other. How does the text inform or not? This text is about the movements around the city of Messina from, the mid-century, what is that, 1661? What does that have to do anything with humans? Absolutely nothing. How did it become associated with that? Was it just because it looked kind of weird? I don't know. So this combination of, interrogating the physical object, the provenance research, plus this idea of biocodicology. So here's another fun vocab word. Codicology is the study of the physical structure of a book and what it tells you about, manufacture, practice, or whatever. Biocodicology is what if we study the structure by applying proteomics, genomics, microgenomics testing. What can we learn about the time and place in which it was built? And that's sort of, I would put our work with the Anthropodermic Book Project into this nascent field of biocodicology. There's an article, I wrote the title right there, it's open access, free to read, that I wrote about what are some of the possibilities one could, train on historical health collections, train some of these on. I polled my colleagues in the librarians, archivists, and museum professionals in the history of health sciences, and they told me things in their collections. Wouldn't it be cool if we could test it this way? And then I sort of talked about some tests that already happened and some things that these professional groups thought would be like potential in the future if that was something that people wanted to undertake. What could we learn from testing books with science. So some of those early tests I kind of list here. Won't get super into it right now, but you know, the 1630 death registers where you've not only got actual plague on it, but the scribe's entire lunch, the mice who probably were eating, who were using the book as their lunch, all traces found on these books. It sounds like science fiction, but I guess all things are science fiction till they're science fact, right? But these were also all parchment books, right? So a lot less processed than the leather books that my team has been testing. So we can not get nearly the level of specificity here. We're just getting down to animal families. So it would be really interesting future research to maybe A/B test some things to, you know, see what kind of sensitivity we can get. Does microgenomic testing, like the ones here, what would it show us on a confirmed human skin book, for instance? So that kind of leads to the future of the project right now. We were on hiatus throughout the pandemic, and we've been fielding requests and stuff the whole time, but we were pretty firm closed for a while, as you might imagine, didn't have access to labs and all that stuff. But we're working slowly to sort of bring it back up because there is a continued interest in testing, and transfer the work to the new independent research group, the Doty Research Institute, by my colleague Anna Doty, who used to work at the Mutter and has opened her own research institute nonprofit to do science tests on museum objects. And so, you know, can we routinize this? Can we grant fund it and have people do it and have it be less of an ad hoc kind of situation? The folks who, you know, the guy who does our chemistry tests, like the guy who does the actual test, you know, he's been retired since before we even started. It's been 10 years, you know? So it's definitely need more than one person doing it, definitely need a more routinized structure to try to build something more sustainable. And then we'd also like to, you know, publish these findings academically so that they're easier for other folks to find who, you know, wouldn't pick up a commercial book but want to know, you know, the actual data and what it means. So I'm gonna downshift a little bit right now into some other sort of manifestations that aren't actually human skin, but are more versions of my book that I think that this particular crowd of bibliophiles would appreciate, so it's more show and tell time. So when my book published in October 2020, nothing was going on and everything was normal and great, and it was just so easy all the time. What actually happened was my book, when it came out in hardcover, was an instant rare book by accident. Because I had the good fortune that a big book club picked my book, and I had to sign 1,800 little, you know, book plates for it. And it's yay, great, this is awesome. And my publishers were super thrilled, and they said, oh, it's going to second printing before it even publishes. This is so great. And it should, you know, the book's coming out in October 2020. It should be in the warehouse by Halloween. You might imagine this was kind of expected to be a Halloween, to hit for Halloween. And then it didn't get into the warehouse until January. So I had the weird situation of having people on Twitter, you know, how do I get my hands on this book? And I'm wow, I'm so glad someone wants to read it, but I'm also horrified that you can't, you know, that you can't get it. And guess what? They didn't want the ebook. They wanted the real hardcover, and it was unavailable. So it took a while for that to come in, and, you know, lo and behold. But one of the secret fun things about publishing a book, if you're lucky enough to get some translations, is that they just show up one day and you see the new cover and whatever, and they're really fun. And so this is Polish and French and Russian. And then I've actually been contracted recently for Japanese. So we will see what the Japanese cover looks like, but it's like a super, super fun thing. But this is relatively, privileged, but normal in Bookland. But because of what my book was about, and because of the community of rare book people I have access to here in Southern California, a different project happened, and so I wanted to share that with you too. So I was at, I'll just go ahead and click to the first one. I was at the Pasadena, at the Antiquarian Book Fair, and I started talking to a bookseller, and he was really into art bindings and had a lot of, showcasing a lot of currently working art binders work. And I told him what I was working on, and he said, please, please, before the book actually publishes, ask your publisher if they can hold on to 5 or whatever text blocks without the cover. Because I bet we could do a really cool project where we could get art binders to do it. So I'm like, yeah, stranger in a kilt in a booth at an antiquarian fair that I met 5 minutes ago. Sure, I'll do that. But Ian Kahn of Lux Mentis, he followed through. He really did. And so I was able to procure those, and he did all the legwork to work with these different binders. And then they created art bindings off of my book, which is unbelievable. And so they were created and then sold, and the selling of those books, and they've all since sold, helped fund what they ended up naming the Dark Archives Scholarship, which is really cool, at the Guild of Bookworkers. So it's for BIPOC bookworkers to take classes and stuff, and it was sold off of these 5 or 6 books, so I'll show you them. So each one did something totally different. I don't always get to talk about these, but for the bibliophiles, I love to roll it out. And the quotes I'll show, they're just little excerpts from the artist statements. Some of them were quite extensive. And so this one was sort of, Colin Urbina took the sort of hiding in plain sight kind of, oh, it looks a little bit creepy and a little bit wrinkled, and the book box looks really plain, but oh, there's this secret inside, And so this book ended up in a private collection recently. I think it was the last one to sell, but Ian wouldn't tell me who it was. I really wanted to know. This one, is anyone familiar with Samuel Feinstein's work? Any binder heads here? Oh wow, this one is so cool. So this is alum tawed pigskin, because like I said, typically pigskin kind of resembles human skin, and alum tawed pigskin is a very old kind of binding material. When you see this white with the big pores, that's kind of in a really old book. That might be a pigskin book. Sam, not to just be bored with doing exquisite art binding, decided I'm going to make my own finishing tools for this. So he literally forged his own tools and created, we've got the book spines going up, and then there are different blind tooling, and then some of them are gilt. And the gilt ones were the 18 human skin books. They're supposed to look like a human hide, he said, and that those were the ones that were proven to be human, are represented on the outside of the book. So I'm kind of glad that the number hasn't changed, because it's still accurate, He was very careful to say at the time, but I thought that was really cool. And Sam's book is at the Boston Athenaeum, which famously also has a human skin book. So this Dominic Riley's, so this one came about in an interesting way. because Dominic is a UK binder, and he did not know Ian, but I know Mary Roach, the author Mary Roach, and she blurbed my book and everything. She's been, you know, she's a wonderful person. And when my book came out, Mary said, "Can you please sign a copy for my cousin who's a bookbinder in the UK?" And it was this guy. And then he heard about the project and he said, "I want to do one." And so Ian's like, "Sure." So he took this sort of CSI approach. There's like bloody thumbprints on the headband. There's all sorts of stuff about it. But he also sort of saw it as an investigation. He took the investigation part of the title and sort of ran with that. And, you know, there's all sorts of puzzle elements to the book. And then the really fun thing is, so you've got these like CSI dead chalk outlines and these strings off of it. And then when you shut off the lights, it says Dark Archives across the top. Just is really cool. It's like a little glow-in-the-dark book. I think this is the other one that's in private hands. This one is so elegant. It might be hard to see, but there's just like a black leather, and then there's this sort of gate on the outside of this animal bone, this like really uniform animal bone that are like put together with these metal things that are holding it. So if you opened the cover, you would see through it, right? It's like, and it was her sort of artist statement about using humans or using animals in creation of luxury items. That was sort of her thought process there. And this one ended up in a place I didn't know about until this happened. Has anyone ever heard of the Walker Library for the History of the Human Imagination? If you Google the images of this library, it will make you die of envy. I guess it's technically a private library, but it's got a pretty public footprint, and Walker's kind of collection is, I want to collect important things from the history of human imagination. And so to have my book in that collection is so cool, and I hope that gets my foot in the door if I ever get to Connecticut so I can go visit, because I really want to see it. He has these like crazy holograph things on them. You have to look at it, trust me. It looks amazing. Speaking of amazing, I never really thought I would see my name tattooed on someone, but especially not in this context. This is really, it's pretty incredible. Gabby Cooksey, so this book ended up actually in my hometown free library, Philadelphia Free Library, and Gabby said, "Why don't I learn to tattoo and then tattoo leather and then bind a book in it?" And I believe she's since gone on to do more projects of tattooing, binding leather, which is really super cool. So this was an experiment of hers that I think worked out pretty well, and then she's continued to like work in that medium and made it sort of a signature, which I think is so cool. And then this one is local. So this, I was not involved at all in the purchase of this book, but it is at UCLA. So it's at UCLA Special Collections. Anyone can go and request us to go see it.